Hi guys, this is John Edward Willie, and I am doing a follow-up on the first video I did, Carpe Noctem, Seize the Night, and I just went for a about 4-mile run. It took me about 40-50 minutes. I don't know what that means, but I have a certain app that allows me to keep track, and it's hilarious because I was going to try to be cute, and this is what I get because I tried to sit down next to this fence and sort of record my first video where I'm just sitting outside and not walking and sort of allowing myself to sort of think without movement and to see where that goes, especially on this gorgeous night with the wind blowing through. I'm sitting between these sort of gaudy new modernist apartments and this like modernist church that has a G.K. Chesterton Academy that I get a kick out of just walking by that, because G.K. Chesterton, what a rascal. But I was getting cramps in my stomach, my abs, which I get sometimes after I run because I got to keep my electrolytes in. So that's something that I'm going to go home and sort of work on. And I was going to be even cuter than that and like hold up this Hamm's beer and be like, I got my post-workout beer right here, and try to be funny, but that's what I get. So I'm just gonna stand up and finish this off like a gentleman, a gentleman of the night, because that's sort of what I am, a scholar of the night. Even though ironically I just recorded a video today celebrating the sun. I recorded a video about 8 a.m. this morning that I think I had called, or I was asking a question: how do you wake up in the morning? Are you a morning person? And I'm probably a little bit more fluent right now, but of course this is at the very end of my day. And so I just did a run, and normally I do runs at the middle of my day or at the beginning of my day if I can, because they sort of do get in the way of my sleeping schedules if I do them too late. Like even this might throw off my sleeping schedule a little bit, but I think that's the price I have to pay to indulge in the pleasure of taking a run at night through the city. Like I said in the first installment of Carpe Noctem, it is an experience where you're sort of experiencing the external of your mind. And I brought up a proposition in that video regarding what I think of as the city itself as an analogy, but also as a literal thing, as being the exterior mind itself, in the sense in which when we live in our city, we are not isolated subjects in a city. In many ways, we are embedded within an interconnected network. And on a certain level, it's not about the idea that I'm talking about, but I really mean to say that when you get out into the city and feel it as something that is alive, because it's not just like something that is totally synthetic and made up. Because what's funny about the city is that no matter where you go, the wild in itself is always growing everywhere. You know what I mean? Like then you have like people like G.K. Chesterton at the academy here, who is sort of like a wild figure in the history of thought. And so it's interesting how when you run, you're sort of naturally tying in the things that you experience. And for me, it's sort of instrumental in orienting myself and sort of seeing that in many ways, like fruit that comes from a tree, like we are the fruit of the city. If you think about civilization and how much we carry civilization in our mind and how much what we are is civilization itself, you find that the city itself is the literal analog for civilization. And there's a really dark, bleak downside to this very idea. But I'll sort of leave that up to other smart, quote unquote, smart people who like to focus on the negative things. But I like to begin with a sort of affirmation of the beauty of everything at night. And even though I'd made a video earlier talking about how my mythology is one that is oriented towards the sun, and I really mean that on a basic level, except that, of course, I don't literally mean it metaphysically, but you'll have to give me a certain poetical indulgence in what I say, because that is what young men these days strive to be, poetical. And of course, I'm speaking ironically paraphrasing Emily Dickinson and regretting it, because who in the hell would know what that reference was for? So pardon me, maybe I should save that for videos I want to make on Miss Emily Dickinson. But for now, I sort of want to introduce the thought that you can become light and live in the city with the light spirit, where you're not necessarily in your car and sort of separate from the city in itself, but you're feeling it with your senses. You're hearing it, you're seeing it, you're touching it. I think there's something really cardinal about that experience. And I think bicycles are great, and these like mopeds or whatever, these electric bikes and other things that people ride are great. But I'm sort of a little bit more old school in the sense in which I believe in the intimacy of a walk or a run. And I walk so often that I take runs sort of like as a way of doing a different kind of walk, like at a certain level. And so, like I said in the last video, I was sort of surprised to discover in looking at some of the essays and journal pieces that I've written before, that like a year or so ago, I wrote an essay, or I mean a journal piece called Carpe Noctem. And in that essay, I described what I experienced tonight, really ironically, which is having cleaned up my apartment, gotten everything really tidy, you know, because I want to focus on writing and recording and stuff like that as much as I can. That's my priority. But on a certain level, physical exercise is just as instrumental as having my space time, quote unquote, in place. And by space time, I mean my routines, which is my time. And by space, I mean my apartment itself. And so I'm sort of playing on the idea that in the city, you're living out the actual interior of who you are, because the city itself is an exterior version of who we are. But I'm also making a microcosm with how we organize our routines and how we organize our very stuff around us, because I think on a certain level, introducing what is apparently like an alchemical or a metaphorical way of thinking can actually allow you to balance out the extreme complexity of being a person alive today. And it's not that like we're trying to like be reductive, to use Madonna's word, or anything like that, but we're wanting to find simplicity when it works, because there's sort of an elegance that I think can be discovered in living according to certain principles that you have to accept on your own, but sometimes you discover that other people have discovered patterns and principles that can be quite helpful. And I think that Circle 8 itself, as you'll see, is sort of a continuation of that. So I'm going to finish it while I am good and not go downhill like I might if I were to continue speaking at this point for its own sake. But I'm John Edward Willie. It's the middle of February 2026, and I've been doing these videos now for about a month, and I have about 8 subscribers. So I'm just putting this here as a sort of what's that thing called, a time box that you sort of plant in the ground, so that later on you can go back and look at it and sort of hear yourself talking to yourself from the past. So this is sort of a message to me in the past. Keep doing what you're doing, because life is surprising. I love you guys. This is Circle 8, and I'm John Edward Willie. Have a good night.